At the younger brother's wedding, the older brother was humiliated in front of all the guests. His seat was at the exit, and the family showed that they didn't consider him part of the celebration. But he didn't stay silent. What happened next shocked everyone. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories, and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? Leo had always known he was different. It wasn't just the way he looked, though that was impossible to ignore. It was the way people reacted to him, the subtle yet undeniable distinction in how he was treated compared to his younger brother, Eli. Their parents, white and comfortably middle class, had built a world where appearances mattered, where everything was neatly arranged and expected to conform to a predetermined narrative. Eli fit into that world seamlessly. His light complexion, his easy charm, the way he naturally embodied everything his parents wanted in a son. But Leo was an anomaly. It had started early, though he hadn't recognized it at the time. As a child, he'd only felt the weight of it in small, fleeting moments, when his mother smoothed Eli's blonde hair and called him her little angel, while barely glancing at Leo's tight curls, when relatives cooed over how much Eli looked like their father but never mentioned Leo in the same breath. At school, teachers praised him for being so well behaved, their voices carrying the unspoken implication that they hadn't expected it from him. He had learned quickly that expectations for him were different, though he couldn't yet articulate why. His father had always been a man of discipline, believing that respect was earned through hard work and obedience. For Leo, that meant perfection was not an option. It was a requirement. If he brought home an A on a test, his father would nod approvingly and say, "That's what I expect from you." If he brought home a B, he would receive a stern look, a shake of the head, and a reminder that he could do better. Eli, on the other hand, received praise for the smallest accomplishments. If he managed a B, it was cause for celebration. If he got an A, their mother would take him out for ice cream. Their father would ruffle his hair and tell him how proud he was. Leo would watch, silent, knowing better than to ask why the rules were different for them. At home, the disparities continued in more ways than grades. When Leo and Eli roughhoused, as brothers did, it was always Leo who was reprimanded. "You're older," their mother would say. "You should know better." If Eli threw a tantrum, he was soothed, given space to express his feelings. When Leo got upset, he was told to calm down, to control himself, to stop acting out. He learned early that emotions were a privilege he wasn't allowed to indulge in. There was a picture on the wall in their living room, taken at a family gathering when Leo was 10 and Eli was 7. In it, their father stood in the center, a firm hand on Eli's shoulder, while their mother held his other hand, beaming. Leo stood just to the side, slightly apart, his smile hesitant, as if he wasn't sure he belonged. That picture had stayed up for years, long after other photos had been replaced with newer ones. Every time Leo saw it, he was reminded of his place, not quite at the center, not quite fully a part of them. By the time he was a teenager, he had stopped trying to bridge the gap. He focused on his studies, on getting out, on proving that he didn't need their approval. He did everything right, graduated at the top of his class, got into a good college, moved out as soon as he could. His parents didn't try to stop him. They had always framed his success as their own achievement, as if his accomplishments were proof of their good parenting rather than his own determination. He let them believe it. It was easier than arguing. Eli, on the other hand, had stayed close. He had attended a local university, kept up Sunday dinners with their parents, remained their golden child in every way. Whenever Leo visited, he felt like an outsider. Conversations revolved around Eli, his new job, his latest relationship, his plans for the future. Leo was an afterthought, a guest in his own family. It wasn't until much later that he would realize just how intentional it all was. At the time, he had thought it was simply favoritism, an unfair but common dynamic between siblings. He had assumed that if he just worked harder, proved himself more, they would see him the way they saw Eli. It would take years for him to understand that it had never been about effort. It had always been about something deeper, something unchangeable. The wedding would make that clear. Leo had long since learned not to expect much from his family, and yet, when the news of Eli's wedding reached him, he was still surprised, not by the event itself, but by how he found out about it. It wasn't a phone call from his mother, nor an enthusiastic message from Eli, nor even a brief acknowledgement from his father. No, Leo found out the way distant acquaintances did, through social media. He had been scrolling idly, filling a quiet evening after work when he saw the post. A professionally taken engagement photo, his brother grinning in a tailored suit, his fiancée beaming beside him, the caption filled with wedding hashtags and a countdown to the big day. Leo stared at it for a long moment, letting the realization settle in. He hadn't been told, not a word, not even in passing. It wasn't until days later that his mother finally called him. Her voice was light, breezy, as if she had only just thought to mention it. "Oh, by the way, sweetheart, Eli's getting married. You'll come, won't you?" Leo had already decided that he would, not because he particularly wanted to, but because he knew what would happen if he didn't. If he declined, the blame would fall entirely on him. He could already hear his father's voice, dripping with quiet disappointment, telling him that families showed up for each other, that he was being difficult. His mother would sigh, her voice filled with that gentle reproach she had mastered over the years, the one that made him feel like he was the one being unreasonable. And Eli, well, Eli wouldn't say anything to him directly. He never did. He would just let their parents fight that battle for him, playing the wounded victim while Leo was framed as the distant, ungrateful brother. No, it was easier to just go, to be present, to endure. But the conversation with his mother left an uneasy feeling in his chest. There was something off about her tone, something deliberately vague. She wasn't excitedly sharing details as he might have expected. She wasn't asking him for help with preparations as one might ask an older brother. It felt more like she was checking a box, like she had remembered at the last moment that he was supposed to be invited and was now fulfilling that obligation. He pushed the thought aside. He had spent most of his life dismissing those small twinges of doubt, convincing himself that he was imagining things. It was second nature by now. The formal invitation arrived a week later. It was elegant, with embossed lettering and gold-trimmed edges detailing the date, time, and venue. He noted absently that it had been addressed to him alone, without the customary +1. It wasn't unusual. He wasn't seeing anyone serious at the moment, but something about it still struck him as deliberate. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being placed at a distance, subtly but unmistakably. Curious, he did a little digging. Through mutual acquaintances, he learned more details about the wedding, the guest list, the venue, the seating arrangements, and it was then that he noticed something odd. He wasn't in the wedding party. That, in itself, wasn't necessarily an insult. Not every sibling served as best man or groomsman. Some people preferred to keep their wedding parties small, but when he looked closer, he saw that Eli's groomsmen included their cousins, childhood friends, even some of his college buddies. People who had barely been in his life for the past decade. People who, in some cases, had never been close to Eli at all. And yet, Leo, his own brother, was absent. He wasn't sure why that bothered him so much. It wasn't as if he had expected to be standing beside Eli at the altar, toasting him at the rehearsal dinner, posing for pictures in matching suits. He and Eli had never been particularly close, not the way some brothers were, but still, it stung. The next time his mother called, he asked about it. Her response was quick, dismissive, as if she had been waiting for the question. "Oh, honey, Eli just wanted to keep it small. You know how weddings are." He let it go. He had long since learned not to argue when it came to family. As the wedding day approached, he busied himself with choosing a gift. He could have gone the easy route, picking something off their registry, but some stubborn part of him wanted to put thought into it. To show, even if just to himself, that he still cared. He found something perfect, something meaningful, something he knew Eli would love. It took time, effort, money. He told himself it was worth it. The night before the wedding, he arrived at the hotel where the guests were staying. The reception desk was bustling with activity, guests checking in, voices buzzing with excitement. He gave his name to the receptionist who scanned the guest list, frowning slightly before saying, "Ah, here you are. Your room is on the 3rd floor." Leo thanked her, took the key, and made his way upstairs. The hotel was nice. Nothing overly extravagant, but elegant in a way that spoke of careful planning. He passed other guests in the hallway, some of whom greeted him with polite nods, others who barely spared him a glance. It wasn't until he reached his room that he noticed something odd. It was at the very end of the hallway. He thought it was a coincidence at first, until he overheard a conversation in the lobby later that evening. One of Eli's friends was talking about how the groomsmen had been given rooms on the 2nd floor, near the main suite. "They wanted to keep everyone close together," the friend was saying. "You know, so it feels more like a family thing." Leo sat back in his chair, letting the words sink in. So it wasn't just the wedding party. It wasn't just the invitation. It wasn't just an oversight. They were keeping him separate, deliberately. He shouldn't have been surprised. He should have expected it. But something about seeing it play out in real time in such small, careful details made his stomach twist. He pushed it aside. He was here. He would get through it. He had done it before. And yet, deep down, he knew something wasn't right. And tomorrow, at the wedding, he was going to find out just how much worse it could get. The morning of the wedding arrived with an air of artificial cheer. The hotel buzzed with the movement of guests preparing for the day's events, bridesmaids adjusting their dresses, groomsmen laughing in the hallways, hotel staff rushing to accommodate last-minute requests. Leo woke to the muffled sound of voices outside his door, a reminder that the celebration had already begun without him. He took his time getting ready, not out of reluctance, but out of a quiet defiance. If they wanted him to be an afterthought, he wouldn't rush to change that. He dressed sharply, dark suit, polished shoes, crisp tie, knowing full well that no one would comment on it. Eli would receive all the attention, as always. Leo had long since accepted that. The wedding ceremony itself took place in a grand, open-air pavilion, decorated with an almost excessive elegance. White roses lined the aisle, delicate lights were woven through the trees, and the guests, dressed in their finest, took their places as soft music played in the background. It was beautiful, undeniably so, and yet Leo couldn't shake the feeling of detachment, as he watched it all unfold. He sat through the ceremony without speaking to anyone, listening as Eli and his fiancée exchanged vows, as the guests sighed in admiration, as the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. The applause that followed was warm and genuine. Eli had always been the golden boy, charming, beloved, the kind of person people naturally gravitated toward. Leo watched as their parents beamed with pride, his mother dabbing at her eyes, his father standing tall with satisfaction. He had seen that expression before, many times, but never directed at him. After the ceremony, guests made their way to the reception hall, a grand ballroom with towering ceilings and chandeliers that cast golden light over the polished floors. The tables were arranged in neat, symmetrical rows, each adorned with pristine white tablecloths and extravagant centerpieces. Waiters moved efficiently, refilling glasses, adjusting plates, ensuring everything was perfect. Leo moved toward the seating chart, scanning the elegant calligraphy for his name. He wasn't expecting anything special, but he assumed he would at least be seated with the family. Instead, his name was nowhere to be found. He frowned, scanning again, wondering if there had been a mistake. "Excuse me," he said to one of the wedding coordinators, a woman in a sleek black dress who was juggling a clipboard and a walkie-talkie. She glanced up with a professional smile. "Yes?" "I don't see my name on the seating chart," he said. She hesitated, flipping through the pages on her clipboard before her expression shifted into something more controlled. "Ah, yes, you're here." She turned and pointed toward a small table near the entrance of the ballroom. It was separate from the main seating area, positioned just outside the main doors near the coat rack. A single chair, a modestly set table, nothing like the lavish arrangements inside. Leo stared at it for a moment, waiting for the punchline. "You're kidding," he said finally. The coordinator's smile tightened. "I'm sorry, but this is where you've been assigned." He had no words at first. The realization settled in slowly, a sharp contrast to the warm, celebratory atmosphere around him. He wasn't just an afterthought. He had been deliberately placed apart, kept outside of the family, outside of the celebration itself. Something cold settled in his chest. He turned and walked back inside, scanning the room, taking in the arrangement. His parents were seated at a prominent table, surrounded by extended family, their expressions relaxed and content. Eli's groomsmen and close friends occupied another large table, laughing over their drinks. Even distant relatives, people Leo barely knew, were seated comfortably among the honored guests. But not him, not the brother of the groom. The realization burned. He found Eli near the head table, still basking in the glow of attention, his suit perfectly tailored, his smile effortless. Their father stood nearby, speaking with guests, his posture exuding pride. Leo approached, waiting until Eli noticed him. "Oh, hey," Eli said, glancing at him with the same casual indifference he always had. "You made it." Leo held up the place card in his hand. "Quick question, why's my seat not in the reception hall?" Eli blinked, then let out a short laugh as if the absurdity of the situation had only just registered. "Oh, that. Yeah, we had to move a few things around last minute." Leo's grip tightened on the card. "And I just happened to be the one who got moved outside?" Eli shrugged. "I mean, yeah, we had to prioritize close family for the main tables." Leo's breath slowed. "I am close family," he said evenly. Their father, who had been pretending not to listen, interjected with an easy, dismissive tone. "Now, Leo, don't make a scene. It's Eli's special day." That was when it truly sank in. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. It was exactly how they saw him. Before Leo could respond, another voice entered the conversation. Eli's new father-in-law had joined them, a man with an air of quiet authority, the kind who enjoyed being at the center of things. He looked Leo over with mild curiosity before speaking. "Oh, you're Leo," he said, a knowing smirk in his voice. "I was wondering who that seat belonged to." Leo forced a thin smile. "Yep, that's me, the sibling who apparently doesn't count." The father-in-law chuckled. "Well, you know how weddings are. Only the most important people get the best spots." And just like that, everything clicked. This wasn't just Eli's doing. This was intentional. A deliberate decision, one that their parents had allowed, that Eli had accepted, that even his new in-laws had acknowledged. Leo had spent years ignoring it, pushing it down, telling himself he was imagining things. But standing there, watching the way they looked at him, he saw it clearly for the first time. They had never really considered him family. Something inside him shifted. He could have walked away, could have swallowed it down like he always did, endured the night, left quietly and let them win. But not this time, not anymore. They had set the terms of this game. They had forgotten one thing. He had grown up with Eli. He knew exactly how to destroy him. Leo stood there, the paper place card still clutched between his fingers, the thin cardboard bent slightly where his grip had tightened. The words swam before his eyes, meaningless now. His name, carefully printed in elegant cursive, held no real place in this celebration, not in the way that mattered. He had spent a lifetime making excuses for them, convincing himself that it was all unintentional, that he was overthinking it, that his parents didn't mean to treat him differently, that Eli didn't know any better. But the truth had always been there, waiting beneath the surface, a slow-building pressure that had finally reached its breaking point. They didn't see him as family. Not really. He had always been the convenient absence, the distant, accomplished older brother who served as a footnote to their perfect, curated lives. They tolerated him, acknowledged him when necessary, but never truly included him. He had told himself it was favoritism, that it was about Eli being the baby of the family, that his parents had simply bonded with him more. But this wasn't just about favoritism. This was about exclusion. The way they had planned the seating, the way they had pushed him to the margins, the way Eli had laughed it off like it was nothing. They had wanted to keep him separate. Out of sight, out of mind. He was nothing more than an obligation to them, someone they had to invite but didn't actually want there. It stung in a way he hadn't expected. He had thought he was past caring. He wasn't. The voices around him blurred together, the laughter and conversation of guests filling the space with an easy warmth that he wasn't a part of. His father had already turned away, back to the guests who actually mattered. Eli basked in the glow of his own success, and his mother, well, she was nowhere to be seen. Probably off playing the role of the doting mother-in-law, fussing over the bride, ensuring everything was perfect. Leo had a choice. He could leave, walk out, toss the place card onto the floor, get into his car, and never look back. It would be the easiest option. The quiet, dignified retreat. He could disappear the way they wanted him to, let them have their perfect evening without his presence ruining their illusion. But something inside him rebelled against that idea. He had swallowed it down for too long. The quiet slights, the dismissals, the unspoken expectation that he would always be the one to step aside. He had endured it at every holiday, every family gathering, every time he had come home only to feel like a guest in his own house. He had played his role, accepted his place in the shadows, Let them believe they could push him aside without consequence. Not tonight. Not this time. If they wanted to make it clear where he stood, then he would make sure everyone knew exactly who they were dealing with. His mind worked quickly, piecing together every conversation, every careless complaint Eli had ever made in his presence. He knew his brother better than anyone. Knew how much of his charm was just an act, how easily he played the role of the devoted son, the loving husband-to-be, the golden boy who could do no wrong. But Leo also knew the things Eli would never say in public, knew the way he truly felt about his new father-in-law, knew how much he had resented the speeches that would be given tonight, the way he had mocked the man behind closed doors, rolling his eyes at his fiancée's insistence that they honor family traditions. Knew that Eli had no real respect for the people he was marrying into, that he was only playing along for the sake of appearances. And Leo knew one more thing. Eli's new father-in-law wasn't the type to let things slide. Leo took a slow breath, steadying himself, feeling the weight of his decision settle into place. This wouldn't be quiet. It wouldn't be polite. It wouldn't be something he could take back. But then again, they had made their choice. Now he was making his. He turned, scanning the room until he spotted him. The man in question, standing near the bar, speaking with a small group of guests, a glass of whiskey in hand. The father of the bride, a man who had built his reputation on respect and tradition, who prided himself on being well-liked, on being a pillar of his community. Leo walked toward him with purpose. Eli wanted to make sure he knew his place. Fine. Let's see what happens when the golden child is forced to face the truth. Leo approached the bar with measured steps, his heart steady, his purpose clear. He had spent a lifetime being careful, choosing his words cautiously, avoiding confrontation to maintain a fragile peace. But the weight of years of dismissal, of being sidelined and reduced to an afterthought, now pressed heavily against his ribs. He was done being careful. The father of the bride, Richard Montgomery, stood in the center of a small circle of guests, exuding the confident presence of a man accustomed to commanding attention. His tailored navy suit, gold cufflinks, and carefully groomed appearance were all part of the image he projected. Wealthy, respected, powerful. Leo had met him only a handful of times, always briefly, but he had seen enough to understand the kind of man he was. Richard valued respect above all else, respect and loyalty, and Eli had neither for him. Leo stepped into the group's orbit just as Richard was finishing an anecdote, one that drew polite laughter from those around him. The timing was perfect. "You know, Richard," Leo said smoothly, his voice carrying just enough weight to make heads turn. "It's funny. Just the other day, Eli was telling me how stressed he was about the seating arrangements. Kept saying he didn't want certain people too close to the head table." A flicker of curiosity crossed Richard's expression. The other guests hesitated, sensing the shift in tone, the unspoken tension that had settled into the air. Richard turned slightly, giving Leo his full attention. "Oh?" Leo nodded, keeping his posture relaxed, as if they were merely discussing an amusing family anecdote. "Yeah." He was really worried about how the photos would turn out. Said something about not wanting them ruined by, what was it, Eli? He turned toward his brother, who had been standing nearby, half distracted by another conversation. "Oh, right, a tacky suit." The ripple of silence that followed was immediate. Eli's expression froze for just a fraction of a second before he forced out a laugh, the sound strained. "Come on, man. You're joking, right?" Leo tilted his head slightly. "Am I?" The guests exchanged glances. Richard's face had darkened, his polite smile thinning at the edges. "I see," he said evenly. Leo wasn't done. He had learned long ago that when people like Eli were caught in a lie, they scrambled. They laughed things off, backpedaled, twisted words to make themselves look innocent. But Richard Montgomery wasn't the kind of man to let things slide, and Leo knew exactly how to deliver the final blow. And then there were the speeches. Leo continued, his voice smooth, deliberate. Eli was really worried about that, too. Kept saying he hoped certain people wouldn't try to make the night about themselves. I believe his exact words were, "If he gives a speech, I swear to God, I'll lose my mind." Said it would be, what was the word? Oh, yeah, embarrassing. The murmur among the guests grew louder. Someone near Richard coughed awkwardly. Richard's smirk was gone now. He turned to Eli. "Is that true?" Eli let out a nervous chuckle, shaking his head. "No, of course not. Leo's just—" Leo cut him off. "Oh, and the bachelor party." He let out a mock gasp, tapping his forehead. "How could I forget? Eli, you spent half the night talking about how you were counting down the days until you didn't have to fake being nice anymore. Said you were only tolerating Richard because you didn't want to start the marriage off with drama." A sharp intake of breath from someone in the crowd. Eli went pale. The effect was immediate. Richard's mouth tightened, his entire demeanor shifting from composed to barely controlled fury. His grip on his glass had turned rigid, his knuckles white. "You ungrateful little brat," Richard said coldly. Leo bit back a smile. Eli stammered, looking wildly around as if hoping for someone, anyone, to step in and save him. His father, who had been standing nearby, looked horrified. His mother had finally appeared, her expression one of pure misery, as if she wished she could vanish into thin air. "This is a misunderstanding," Eli said quickly. "Come on, you know I—" "Don't," Richard snapped. "Don't even try." The tension in the room was suffocating now. Guests were whispering to one another, some exchanging glances, others deliberately avoiding eye contact. Leo leaned back slightly, as if merely an observer in the spectacle he had created. "I mean, you can't really blame him, right?" he mused. "You did, after all, put a lot of money into this wedding, and favors, and connections, and all this time, Eli's just been, what was the phrase? Oh, yeah, tolerating you." Richard's face was a mask of cold fury. He turned toward Leo and, to his surprise, let out a short, humorless laugh. "You know what? I actually believe you." Eli made a strangled noise. Leo smiled. His father finally stepped forward, desperate to salvage the moment. "Now, Richard, I'm sure this is all just a—" Richard cut him off. "Did you know about this?" Eli's father hesitated, mouth opening, then closing. Richard shook his head. "You raised him to be this kind of person, didn't you?" The words were like a dagger. His father visibly flinched, struggling to find the right response. "Richard, please." Eli's mother spoke for the first time, her voice unsteady. "This is a wedding. Let's not—" Richard turned his fury back to Eli. "So all this time you've been playing the dutiful son-in-law, pretending to be part of this family, while mocking me behind my back?" Eli swallowed hard. "I never—" "Oh, give it up," Leo said, rolling his eyes. "You got caught." Eli turned on him with a look of sheer desperation, his mask slipping entirely. "You're ruining my wedding." Leo raised an eyebrow. "Am I? Or did you do that yourself?" The whispers in the crowd had turned into open conversations now, people openly watching as Eli's world began to unravel. Some of the groomsmen exchanged amused glances, as if they had long suspected the truth, but never had the proof laid out so clearly before them. One of them even let out a quiet laugh, shaking his head. Eli whipped toward him. "You think this is funny?" The groomsman barely suppressed a grin. "A little." Eli's hands curled into fists, his face turned an alarming shade of red. But before he could explode, Leo decided he had had enough. "Well," he said, stretching slightly, "this has been lovely, really, just a fantastic experience. But I think it's time for me to go." Eli scoffed, throwing up his hands. "Fine. Go." Leo smiled. "Oh, don't worry, I will." He turned toward the gift table, casually scanning the stack of expensive-looking presents until he found the one he had brought. It stood out, not because it was particularly large or extravagant, but because it was the one he had put actual thought into, the one he had chosen carefully, even when he hadn't been sure if they deserved it. He plucked it from the pile with an easy motion. Eli's jaw dropped. "Are you seriously taking it back?" Leo gave him a deadpan look. "Why would I leave it? Apparently, I'm not real family, right?" Eli let out an incredulous laugh. "You're such a child." Leo shrugged. "Maybe, but at least I'm not a fake, lying, two-faced brat." He turned to Richard and gave him a small nod. "Good luck with this one. I give it a year." Richard let out a low chuckle. Eli screeched something behind him, but Leo wasn't listening anymore. He walked toward the exit, the tension behind him thick enough to cut with a knife. Guests stared. The music had stopped entirely. The wedding had transformed from a celebration to an absolute disaster. As he reached the doors, he glanced back one last time. Eli was still arguing with Richard, his parents looking as if they wished they could disappear, the bride staring at her new husband as if seeing him for the first time. Leo smiled, waved slightly, and walked out. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The night air was crisp as Leo stepped out of the reception hall, the low hum of murmured conversations and music still audible behind him. But the atmosphere had changed. The celebration was no longer seamless, the joy no longer uninterrupted. He had left something behind in that room, something irreversible. He had cracked the illusion, shattered the neat, curated image that Eli and his family had built, and the pieces were still falling. He didn't need to look back to know that. He could feel it. He adjusted the weight of the wedding gift under his arm as he walked toward his car. The absurdity of the moment wasn't lost on him. He had arrived at this wedding prepared to be nothing more than a quiet observer, an afterthought, just another guest in the background. And yet, here he was, walking away as the catalyst for a disaster he hadn't even planned. At least, not at first. He tossed the gift into the passenger seat, started the car, and drove. The streets were quiet, the city lights passing in a blur. He should have felt angry. He should have felt hurt. And maybe, somewhere deep inside, he did. But above all, there was satisfaction. The kind that came with a long overdue reckoning, the weight of years of silence finally lifted. They had made him invisible for too long, and tonight they had been forced to see him. He barely made it halfway home before his phone started buzzing. The first call was from his father. He let it ring. Then his mother. He ignored that one too. Then Eli. That one, he didn't even consider answering. By the time he pulled into his driveway, his phone had vibrated so many times that it nearly slid off the console. He sighed, shut off the engine, and picked it up. The notifications blurred together. Calls, texts, voicemails, a mix of fury and desperation. He scrolled through the messages, amusement flickering at the sheer variety of responses. "Dad, what were you thinking? You humiliated your brother on the most important day of his life. Call me back. Now. Mom. Leo, please, we need to talk. Just call me when you can. Eli. You ruined everything. I can't believe you would do this to me. Eli. I hope you're happy. I can't even look at my wedding photos because of you. Eli. You took back your gift? Are you serious? What kind of person does that? Eli. I hate you. I really, really hate you. Leo let out a slow breath, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Eli's messages were the easiest to ignore. His brother had spent years coasting on charm, manipulating their parents, avoiding consequences. He had never learned what it felt like to face the truth. Until now. He put the phone down, poured himself a drink, and sank into the couch. The night replayed in his mind, each detail as vivid as if he were still standing in that ballroom, still watching Eli's face shift from smug amusement to pale horror. He had spent his whole life watching Eli win, watching their parents excuse him, defend him, love him unconditionally in a way they had never loved Leo. And for the first time, he had taken something from Eli that he couldn't buy back, couldn't talk his way out of. He took a slow sip, exhaling deeply. It was about time. His phone buzzed again, and this time it was a different name on the screen. His mother, again. He hesitated for a moment before answering. Leo. Her voice was quiet, tired, not angry, not sharp the way their father's would have been. He didn't respond. She sighed. Why would you do this? He laughed softly, shaking his head. Wasn't my fault they lit the fuse. There was a long pause. Then, to his surprise, she let out a small, almost tired chuckle. Yeah, they kinda did. That caught him off guard. He sat up slightly, the amusement fading just enough for curiosity to settle in. Wait, you agree with me? I didn't say that, she replied, her voice quieter now, almost reluctant. But I saw what happened, Leo, and I saw how your father and Eli treated you. It wasn't right. That admission, however small, was more than he had ever expected from her. So, he said slowly, you're the only one not blaming me? There was another pause before she murmured, not the only one. He frowned slightly. What does that mean? She let out another sigh, and this time there was something different in her voice, something heavier. Leo, you left, but things didn't just go back to normal after you did. The damage... She hesitated. It wasn't fixable. His curiosity sharpened. He leaned forward. What happened? She exhaled slowly. After you left, Richard was furious. I mean, truly furious. He humiliated Eli in front of everyone, demanded to know if everything you said was true. And Eli... She hesitated again. He panicked. He tried to lie at first, tried to say you were making things up. But Richard already suspected something. Your little revelation just confirmed it. Leo smirked. He could picture it now. Eli floundering, trying to salvage his image, trying to control the situation like he always did. But this wasn't their parents. This wasn't some minor scolding he could smooth over with a well-timed apology. Richard wasn't the forgiven type. And by the time the reception ended, Richard had all but disowned him. Leo raised his eyebrows. Disowned? Cut him off, completely. Leo whistled lowly, running a hand through his hair. He hadn't expected it to go quite that far. That's not all, his mother continued. The bride, she was furious too. Apparently, she had no idea Eli had been talking about her father behind her back like that. She thought they had a great relationship. There was a pause. Let's just say that they had a very long fight that night. Leo leaned back, exhaling. And my parents? What about Dad? His mother hesitated. He's trying to patch things up with Richard, but I don't think it's going to work. Richard is done. The bride is barely speaking to Eli. And as for Eli, another pause. Well, he's not handling it well. Leo rolled his eyes. Shocker. He's blaming you for everything, she admitted. He thinks if you hadn't said anything, none of this would have happened. Leo let out a short, humorless laugh. Of course he does. There was silence on the other end. Then his mother spoke again, softer this time. He wants you to apologize. Leo actually choked on his drink. Apologize. He thinks it's the only way to fix things. He thinks if you take the blame, maybe Richard will forgive him and things can go back to normal. Leo laughed again, shaking his head. Yeah, that's not happening. I figured, his mother said, and then in a lower voice, and honestly, I don't think you should. That made him pause. Wait, seriously? I told you, Leo. I saw what happened, and honestly, maybe it's about time someone called him out. Leo sat there for a long moment, absorbing that. His mother had always been passive, always let their father and Eli dictate how things played out. She had never spoken up for him, never taken his side. This wasn't an apology. It wasn't an admission of guilt, but it was something, and maybe, for the first time, it was enough. He sighed. So what now? She hesitated. Your father will keep trying, but I don't think Richard is going to change his mind. And the bride? Another pause. She might not stay. Leo smirked. Good. His mother sighed again. I just thought you should know what's happening. Leo nodded, taking another slow sip of his drink. Thanks for the update. He ended the call. Then he leaned back, staring at the ceiling, letting it all sink in. For the first time in years, he felt light. The next morning, Leo woke to the familiar hum of his phone vibrating on the nightstand. A soft, persistent buzz was relentless, a steady reminder that, despite the silence of his home, the world outside was very much alive and waiting for his response. He ignored it at first, staring at the ceiling, letting the weight of last night settle fully in his chest. He had known the fallout would come. It had been inevitable the moment he chose to speak, the moment he decided to stop swallowing the words he had buried for years. Still, the sheer volume of messages waiting for him was impressive. As he reached for his phone, the screen lit up with a flood of missed calls, unread texts, and voicemails. His father had called 6 more times after his last attempt the previous night. Eli had sent more texts, the content shifting from fury to outright begging. His mother had left another voicemail, her tone softer than the first, more resigned. But what truly caught his attention was the text from an unexpected sender. Hannah Montgomery. The bride. That one. He opened first. Hannah, I don't know if you'll even read this, but thank you. That was it. Just 2 words. No explanation, no elaboration. But Leo didn't need one. He leaned back against the pillows, letting out a slow breath, so she had figured it out. Whether or not she would go through with ending the marriage, he didn't know. But the fact that she had reached out at all, the fact that she had acknowledged what had happened, what he had exposed, meant something. It was the first tangible sign that his actions had real consequences, that what he had done hadn't just burned bridges, but had opened someone else's eyes. Still, there were other fires to put out. With a reluctant sigh, he scrolled through his father's messages. Dad, answer the phone. Dad, I'm not playing these games, Leo. Dad, you had no right to do what you did. Dad, this is your brother's life, his future. You think this is funny? You think it's some joke to you? Dad, call me. The anger practically bled through the screen. Leo could imagine his father pacing, his voice tight, his face red from frustration. He had always been the type of man who valued order, who thrived on control. What Leo had done last night had shattered that control in a way his father could not fix. For a long moment, he debated whether to respond at all. Then, against his better judgment, he called. The phone barely rang twice before his father picked up. Leo. The way he said his name was sharp, edged with restrained fury. Leo didn't bother with pleasantries. You wanted me to call, so talk. His father exhaled hard, like he was barely holding himself together. What the hell were you thinking? Leo didn't flinch. I was thinking that I finally had enough. You had enough? His father's voice rose, incredulous. Do you even understand what you did? This family, your brother? What about him? Leo cut in. What exactly do you think I ruined? His lies? His perfect little performance? His ability to fake his way through another relationship? His father's silence was brief but telling. That wasn't your place, Leo. Wasn't it? Leo let out a short, humorless laugh. Because I think you and Mom made it pretty damn clear last night that I don't have a place in this family at all. That is not what this is about, his father snapped. Isn't it? Leo shot back. Because it sure as hell felt like it when I found out my seat wasn't even in the reception hall. When I realized that you and Mom didn't just overlook me, you deliberately made sure I was out of the way. Because I'm not part of the image, right? I don't fit into the perfect picture you want to show the world. His father hesitated. Leo? No, Leo interrupted. You don't get to act like this was some minor oversight. You don't get to pretend like I was imagining it. You knew exactly what you were doing. Eli knew exactly what he was doing, and the fact that you're angrier at me for telling the truth than at him for being a lying, manipulative coward says everything I need to know. There was silence on the other end. Then, finally, his father spoke, quieter this time. You still didn't have to do it like that. Didn't I? Leo exhaled, running a hand over his face. Tell me, Dad, if I hadn't said anything, would you have ever acknowledged how you treated me? Would you have ever admitted that, from the moment I was born, you and Mom made me feel like an outsider in my own family? His father didn't answer. Leo sighed. That's what I thought. Another beat of silence. Then his father, voice weary, said, Your mother wants to talk to you. Leo hesitated, then nodded to himself. Fine. There was a shuffle, the phone exchanging hands, and then his mother's voice came through, softer than his father's, but carrying a weight of exhaustion. Leo, he sighed. Mom. She let out a slow breath, as if choosing her words carefully. I know you don't want to hear this, but I wish you had waited. Waited for what? Leo asked, his voice steady. For it to come out naturally, she said, almost pleading. For Eli to learn in his own time. You didn't have to be the one to what? Leo cut in. To force you all to finally see it? She was quiet for a long moment, then finally she admitted, he needed to hear it. I wish it had been different. Leo closed his eyes. Yeah, me too. She sighed again. Your father's never going to admit it, but he knows you're right. He just doesn't know how to deal with it. That's not my problem, Leo said. Not anymore. His mother was silent for another moment before she finally murmured, No, I guess it's not. There was a pause. Then, just before she ended the call, she said, Take care of yourself, Leo. He hung up. He sat there for a long moment, phone still in his hand, staring at nothing in particular. Then, slowly, he leaned back against the couch, exhaling. For years, he had waited for something like this, for acknowledgement, for even the smallest admission that he hadn't been imagining things, that he hadn't just been overreacting, that the way they had treated him wasn't normal. And now he had it. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a full reckoning, but it was something. And maybe, just maybe, it was enough. The days after the wedding passed in an unusual quiet. The immediate storm of phone calls and messages slowed to a trickle, and soon even Eli's frantic texts faded into silence. It was strange, in a way, to realize that he had spent so many years bracing for moments like this, tense, exhausting confrontations with his family, only to find himself in a place where their absence no longer weighed so heavily on him. Leo didn't reach out. He had no reason to. There was nothing left to say. He had spent a lifetime being careful with his words, walking the tightrope of expectation, swallowing his frustration in favor of keeping the peace. But peace had never been real. It had been a quiet suffocation, a slow erasure of everything he was supposed to be. He was done with that now. The finality of it settled in slowly, a strange mix of relief and grief. He wasn't sad in the way he expected to be. There was no deep sorrow, no desperate longing to patch things up. What he felt was more like mourning for something that had never existed. For the family he had wanted, for the brother who might have been different, for parents who could have chosen him the way they had always chosen Eli. But grief, like anything else, faded with time. And Leo had no intention of waiting around for a resolution that would never come. A week after the wedding, his mother called again. This time he answered without hesitation. "Leo," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "Mom." A pause. Then, "Are you doing okay?" He let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "Yeah, I actually am." She hesitated as if she wasn't sure how to respond to that. "Good," she said finally. "That's good." There was a time when that small exchange would have been frustrating, when he would have wanted more, an apology, an admission of guilt, something to prove that she understood what had happened. But now, he just accepted it for what it was. After a beat, she sighed. "Your father still won't talk about it, but he's been—" She trailed off, searching for the right words. Leo didn't need her to finish. "He's still trying to fix things with Richard." "Yes," she admitted, "but I don't think it's working." Of course it wasn't. Richard Montgomery wasn't the kind of man to forgive an insult like that, especially not one that had been so thoroughly exposed in front of an audience. "And Eli?" Leo asked, though he already had a guess. His mother exhaled, a slow, measured sound. "He's not handling it well." Leo smirked. "Shocking." "He's still convinced you're the reason everything fell apart," she continued, her tone weary. "He keeps saying that if I had just stayed quiet," Leo finished for her. "If I had just let it go. If I had played along and kept pretending that everything was fine." She didn't say anything. "That's not my problem," he said simply. Another pause, then she said, "No, I suppose it's not." That was the moment he knew things had changed. She would never fully be on his side, not in the way he might have wished for when he was younger. She was still married to the man who had ignored him, still the mother of the son who had betrayed him. But she wasn't denying it anymore. She wasn't pretending it hadn't happened. And maybe that was the best he was ever going to get. "Leo," she said after a long moment, "I know we haven't always been fair to you." He let that sink in, waiting. "I don't know if that means anything to you," she admitted, "but I wanted to say it." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was something. And for once he didn't need anything more than that. "I hear you," he said finally. Another silence stretched between them, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. "I should go," she said, "but I hope you'll call again." Leo considered it. "Maybe." He hung up before she could say anything else. For the first time in a long time, he felt weightless. He hadn't forgiven them, not really. He didn't know if he ever would. But he had spent too many years waiting for them to change, to see him, to love him the way he had deserved to be loved. He wasn't going to spend another second of his life hoping for something they would never give. The next morning, he got a text from Hannah Montgomery. "Hannah, just so you know, I'm staying with my parents for now, thinking things over." Leo stared at the message, then smiled. "Leo, take your time." She didn't respond right away, but she didn't have to. Some things took time to fully fall apart. Some truths, once spoken, couldn't be undone. And sometimes breaking things was the only way to finally be free. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Check out our other videos for more, and don't forget to share this one with others who might like it.